Hey guys, it's Melanie, the body listener here. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to share this really awesome story about one of my clients who came in with horrible back pain. And she's kind of a badass because, well, all my clients are total badasses. But she's a mom of six and a pediatric nurse for special needs. She came to me over a year ago, and we've been working on back pain, but really we start noticing that there was some other stuff going on, that she was super permeable and definitely in other people's energy, and especially her kids, her adult kids, all of her friends. She's got the biggest, hugest heart of love and was out in people's business and energy. Now she knows, right, that she wasn't supposed to be. So she kept reeling it in and reeling it in. And then she got her test when something pretty gnarly happened in her family, and then noticed that everything started reactivating after she had no pain for a really long time. And then we broke through to the other side on some other stuff on where it came from. So it's hard stuff, and it's beautiful, and it's raw, and we all go through it. So the good news is there's healing. There's always healing, and that's why a lot of my clients want me to tell their stories and give me their permission, which I am so blessed. I've been doing this work for 22 years, and it was very secretive and very quiet and very, we can't talk about it. And now since, 2016, Me Too movement, all these other things, those proclamations on who we are, what we've gone through, and to not be ashamed of all of those past situations that we fell into, that we came into, that was part of our path, part of our karma, and definitely part of what we call in yoga dharma, like your life path. Yes, we have free will, and also weird shit happens sometimes over and over again that if we would have chose from a right place, that's where we were. So it's okay. If we would have chose from the right place today, we would never have done that. But, we didn't know what we knew. What we know now, we didn't know then. So thanks for tuning in. And as we go to the story, it'll just go to audio on the video, and then we will listen to the rest. All right, enjoy. See ya. Peace. Hey everybody, it's Melanie, the body listener. Thanks so much for joining me today for one of our healing stories that I love to share. This is a good long one, but gosh, it's really worth it. So about a year ago, I had a client who came in, amazing perseverance, strength, a good heart. And as always, it's so not easy to get into this shit. You know that. It takes time, but it's always worth it. Hope you enjoy hearing about her story as much as I did experiencing it, and I hope this gives you some kind of hope and awareness and inspiration in regards to your own healing story. So it starts off with the backstory. A sweet, strong mama client with 6 kiddos came in after texting me a bunch of stuff that was going on in her family, that her back pain was back. And I told her it was a better idea. Why don't you come in and get a session so we can go through some things for healing rather than texting? That gets a little arduous for both parties. I knew we wanted to unfold some things, and she needed a little bit more intimacy to be able to do that, to come in one-on-one. So she come to me because of severe debilitating back pain. She was a special needs pediatric nurse with a slight build. She was pretty small and thin, but she was strong in body and mind. She'd been lifting her 60-pound client and probably injured herself over time, but we found out as we spoke in that first session that it was also activated during stress. She had a lot going on in her life, both positive and stressful, and she said that she could feel the emotional parts of her get spun out when anything happened with her adult and younger kiddos. Makes perfect sense, right? We talked about people's paths, and she realized how much of an empath that she really was. Having learned to feel the emotions of others, she had not quite learned the healthy boundaries and how to protect herself and not absorb all of it. Can you imagine being a special needs nurse and 6 kids and coming from what we all come from and then feeling everybody's stuff along the way? How could one person's body actually deal with all of that? So as a nurse, she was definitely an informational person. She had a lot of facts and philosophy that came up and out in her sessions, and she drank them all in and processed them very quickly. She's what we call Vata. Big brain, lots of creativity, lots of movement all the time. Thin build, all of that, but it can also get very fragile over time if it's not nourished properly. So she wondered aloud why she hadn't come sooner, which we quickly concluded together that she wasn't ready to know any of these things or work on them until now. We all know that. It's hard shit, right? So this day we talked about this big incident that happened in her house with her adult teenage son that involved also her grandson. It was pretty rough, guys. And she had to get the authorities involved, which we know is no fun. She cried as she told me that she was okay and that she was so surprised how she actually dealt with it this time. That before the work we had done together, she would have yelled and screamed and created more chaos on top of the already existing chaos. Instead, she had more command of her body and mind. She was way calmer, and she had her faculties about her and did what needed to be done. She said she cried and was absolutely devastated, of course, but this time it was different. She actually laughed and said her husband asked her who she was because he didn't even recognize her. I said, sounds like you're having normal emotions instead of reactions. When you're an empath, you can get stuck in just reacting to everything that's going on, to everybody and everyone around you, and get into the feeling. We don't even have a separation, right? To actually have normal emotions instead of a reaction such as sadness and anger, that's huge progress. So we spoke about how she was trying to not get involved in it, how her adult children were just that, they were adults, and how involved we get when we are codependent empaths. We can have compassion, we can have awareness, we can have lots of love, we can have empathy, but when we get involved and take it on as our own, we know that that's codependency. Sometimes we even take on more of other people's situations than sometimes they do. And how this doesn't actually help them, it actually gets in the way of their growth and healing. And it makes us sick, really sick. She told me she'd always taken on everyone else's stuff, that she could feel their feelings, and that it affected her like it was happening to her. I nodded in agreement, because don't I get this? It's textbook, right? I had been through it so many times in my life, and watched so many clients go through it too, and only now, being out of it, could she even tell the difference. I told her about the ways that we learned to adapt when we were younger, and feeling other people's feelings could have been one of them. It's the barometer in our house of what was going to happen, and if it happened to them, it was probably going to have an effect on you as well. So we learned how to feel the winds of change and all that caused it. That sometimes we don't get our needs met, and other people who are in charge of taking care of us can't or won't, so it's up to us to know what their needs are. We can try and take care of them and all the situations around us so we don't feel their pain and all the aftermath. One of our superpowers is that we had to learn what other people's needs were first so we could try and meet those. Otherwise, sometimes bad things would happen in our households. And sometimes, if we were lucky enough and we did it well enough, we would get some of our needs met in the exchange. And maybe sometimes, or a lot of the times, we would get some love. For a while anyways, until their needs became more important again. We talked about all those younger selves that sustained trauma that were left behind. They had to grow up early and take care of others. Without care and nurturing to grow, part of us can stay in that developmental stage for a really long time, stunted and stuck, because we can't heal. And then things happen around us that are similar and they trigger us. And this is the part of us that we start to act like. Those parts of us that don't have the mature skills to deal with all the hard things because they haven't grown up and are still stuck at the age they were when the trauma happened. They deal with things the same way that they learned to respond to those other things. She nodded her head in agreement, and it looked like her wheels were turning. The realization. The room went silent for a bit, and she looked up at me. She started talking about a connection that she had just made. She told me how when she was 14, she had watched her grandfather have a heart attack and die. It was just her in the car with him, and they had gotten a flat tire, and they had to pull over and change it. He got out and fell over. He cracked his head on the road, and he passed away. And the way that she said it, you could tell, of course, that it still bothered her, but it was stuck inside of her. She said that there was before this incident and an after this incident. It's pretty common, I told her. A turning point of our lives, right? We end up fractured. The person that we were before this trauma can feel like they are trapped behind glass, and the new person that we had to become to adapt and survive, it's not even fully us. We have parts missing, and we know it. But we do the best we can. We use whatever defense mechanisms that we can to give the illusion of safety and joy, and we do what we need to do to take the pain away. She went on to tell me how no one consoled her after this huge trauma happened, that she had to even go to the police station and be interviewed about all the details of what had happened, how he cracked his head open on the road, and that no one asked her how she was. Her parents were completely devastated, but they didn't even come to her side. Even at the funeral that she had to go to, no one was there for her. She had to deal with the trauma of all of this alone, at the age of 14. Not only had she lost her dear grandfather, but she had to see and experience this huge trauma by herself with no way to process it or heal it. I nodded and listened. Man, how horrible that must have been for you. This happened to your grandfather, but it also happened to you. And there's part of you that's still stuck back there, isn't there? Yup. And she hasn't healed yet, has she? Nope. She said she still remembered it like it just happened. She knew that she had dreams and nightmares of it right after it happened, but now she could see it like it was right there in the treatment room. I told her that it sounded exactly like PTSD. She went on to tell me that that's when she started doing drugs, trying to make those pictures in her head go away, and all the feelings. But no matter how much she did, they always came back when she got sober, and that she ended up making more bad decisions, and then having more shame and more loneliness, and then doing more things to try and cover up the increasing pain. Of course, this is the cycle of addiction. This is the cycle of trauma. Every person that I've ever worked with who has done self-destructive behaviors has some kind of trauma under it, right? They usually open up with me pretty easily because I've been through it, I can handle it, and I'm open to it. If we don't get to it through talking and they're opening up, it usually comes out in their body, for these are the ailments that they come here to heal. And there she was, speaking bluntly about the pivotal time in her life that she only had told a handful of people. It was the thing that helped shape her life more than anything else. How did all the treatments miss this? How did drug rehab miss this? How did it never come up before now in therapy? It was such a significant story in her life. Now, would we say it was the only cause? No, I haven't had that experience in my practice or my life. And it doesn't mean that everything is tainted and awful because of it. It's an outcome from this person's path. And she had gotten clean on her own after years. But this part of her was still living in her system and never got to heal. Not only had we determined that when she has stress in her life that this part of her shows up, it also has been running the show. She can't fully move beyond her 14-year-old and how she runs her life, because when things get hard, she knows she flips back into her 14-year-old self. She uses the coping mechanisms that worked for her back then. Maybe not drugs, but right before that. Stuck at 14 years old. There was no one to take care of her, so she's still left alone having to help everyone else. She was really good at it, but the rest of her is over it. The rest of her is tired, resentful, and fed up. Her body had had it. And also, she doesn't get to access all of those good parts of the 14-year-old, those great, unique, and amazing characteristics. She's all locked up away in her subconscious mind and in her body. We decided that now she can continue to learn how to love up her younger self and give her what she needs. Once she integrates her, she will have access to even more of her positive traits and be more whole. She took a huge breath and then started talking about her back pain, how she realized it was doing so much better after she slowed down and started taking care of herself. With 6 kids, we know that isn't easy unless you are as strong and determined as she was. And if you want to be the good role model in your kids' lives and be someone solid for them to come to, you can't be the martyr that ends up sick and in pain anymore. She knew it was time for her to grow beyond her trauma, and she was doing the work. Healing it in the body. So you know how I told you that she was strong and Vata and moved pretty quick, right? So she pops off the chair as she's telling me about some of the stretching that she's doing for her back. And she says, I know you teach yoga, so I wondered if you could show me if what I'm doing is okay. I don't know if I'm quite getting it. "Sure, show me," I replied, smiling, since she was obviously moving to the floor to show me. She laid down and bent her knees to her chest, and I saw her energy block up and contract in the middle of her back. Oh, hang on a minute. My yoga and stretching is therapeutic, all alignment and energetic base. Basically, it's body work in action. It's energetic body architecture, as I like to call it. So I showed her the alignment of a beginning standing pose so she could see how her body was working together and where it was blocked. I showed her how to bring more parts of her body together to release the pressure off her low back. I had her mimic this pose then as she was laying down. I spotted off all the cues so her body and mind would get what she needed to be able to open up her energy and bring it in to start accessing her sore back. Bringing her belly button toward the spine is what she needed to do to support her back. I had her open up her hips and imagine her sacrum moving forward. Her ribs were splaying wide open on the front of her body, which I could see that it meant her energy was leaking right out of her solar plexus on the front body. I showed her how to knit her ribs together, kind of like a corset, which helps to contain the energy. Very often when the solar plexus is this open, it can show up with people being very available to everyone, the front side of us. But the private and past side, the back side of us, can take the strain. So we borrow energy from the front to move us in a more equal balance of the yin and yang energies of the area. You could totally see her energy shift and ground and breathe. She became more calm. I asked her how she felt. "Wow, feels so much better already." I told her that she had been working so hard to drum up all this energy and she was just giving it all away. It was time for her to keep it, to contain it, and be only involved in things that don't drain her as much. I explained the solar plexus chakra area some more and how it can be affected. And then I said, well, all the chakras run in cycles of 7 years. This one starts developing at, 14 years old. I paused. It's the time frame between fucking 14 and 21 years old. The front side needs to support your back because it's causing you so much pain. It started here emotionally and ends up physically, and it just can't take it anymore. The room became still. She cried and sobbed. I got tears in my eyes. We looked at each other in silence for a few seconds. The energy was palpable. The story of the body and the mind had come together. This was the time of her massive trauma, 14, the time frame that we're talking about. And we both knew that we had just found it in the body, and now she knew how to help it heal. It was time for her to quit making her 14-year-old work so hard and spill all of her energy out all over the place. It was time for her to heal that younger self. Finding out what she needed back then and beginning to give it to herself, her body told us if we would just stop to listen, because the body always knows. The after story. I'm happy to say that this client no longer suffers with harsh back pain. It still bothers her from time to time, but she states that it's usually when she's doing too much. What working mom of 6 isn't, right? And or stressed. Then she knows what she needs to do to take care of herself, and if it starts flaring, how to slow down and give it rest. She says she continues to apply the skills of not taking on the energy of other people's issues, and we know that this is not always easy, especially when they're suffering. She is still a very busy nurse, mom, and now successful photographer in our area. I thank her from the bottom of my heart for sharing her healing story with us, helping me to know even more how body holds this trauma until it's fully released. This is when the healing can begin, and then it's an ongoing process of self-care, self-love, discovery, and learning. This is how the body and mind heals, and it never ceases to amaze me. Thanks so much for joining me for this story of how to heal by listening to your body. The body always knows, but the mind, it's kind of tricky. Gets in the way, doesn't it? I hope this can inspire you to do something for yourself. That all that healing is within, as long as we can stay still and begin to listen to it. Have a beautiful day. Happy healing.